you know, nostalgia and the romanticizing of the past decades, especially with sports. You have people saying like the 90s and the 2000s. Some say the 80s was the best era of football. And most people would say the 90s was the best era of basketball. So you have these people. It's always the Bad Boys Pistons is the team that people bring up when they compare the old players to the new generation of players like KD, Steph, LeBron, uh, Kawhi, uh, PG, AD, all the top dudes. It always comes back to they couldn't have dealt with the Bad Boys Pistons. The 80, 89 and 90s Bad Boys Pistons were two of the best teams to ever win a championship. I'll give them that. But people make it seem like that brand of basketball was the brand of basketball that was played in the 80s. The majority of the 80s was played like that. No. Everybody hated playing against the Bad Boys Pistons because they were by far the dirtiest team in the 80s. So using them as a standard of physicality and the type of defense that was played is just flat out wrong. Which leads me to my topic. Charles Barkley chimes in on a debate about Magic Johnson and Steph Curry. His point being, Steph Curry couldn't have survived against the Bad Boys Pistons. You know how John Sally and Lambeer and what was my man name? The man that Isaiah hit and he ended up playing for him. Punched him like 3, 4 times in the face. His name slips me right now. But the Bad Boys Pistons. He's saying he couldn't have took the physicality to go up against the Bad Boys Pistons. Now, they make it seem like, and they often do this with Steph because he's a smaller guard. Well, not smaller guard, he's 6'3", but he's a skinny guard. People make it seem like Isaiah Thomas wasn't a small player who played in the 80s. Um, Mark Price, who Isaiah Thomas said he lit him up in the 80s. If people go back, you don't even have to go back. You can just pull it up on YouTube. There's an interview that Isaiah Thomas did saying that Mark Price would routinely light him up, and there's nothing that he could do with Mark Price. And then he goes on to say that the player that most resembles Mark Price that he sees in today's game is no other than Steph Curry. So please tell me how Mark Price gave Isaiah Thomas and the Bad Boy Pistons fits, but Steph Curry couldn't. Steph Curry is in my opinion, the new era, the era of Mark Price that if would have stayed healthy, that's what Steph Curry, that's what Mark Price would have been. He wouldn't have been Steph, but he would have been close to it. Awesome shooter, could shoot off the dribble, pick and roll monster, and was a good passer. But since he didn't make it, he had those terrible knees. I think it was his knees gave him real bad problems. He couldn't make it. But that's the ace in the hole when people go back to he couldn't play in the 80s because the Pistons would have beat him up. He wouldn't have been able to let. And Stephen A. said this before, up until now, where he said Steph is the greatest point guard, which Steph isn't the greatest point guard. But the reasons that people use are kind of stupid, and when it always goes back to can he play in the 80s? Could he play against the Bad Boys Pistons? It was always teams that lit up the Bad Boys Pistons that were smaller guards. Like Kevin Johnson would give Isaiah Fitz. It was other smaller guards that gave Isaiah Thomas fits. They make it seem like the nobody played well against the Bad Boys Pistons, but that was my video debunk.